Hello and welcome to a very special edition of The Long Road to Ruin. I am your host, the mandated reporter, and frankly I'm mortified, Mr. Mark Radulich. With me as always is my co-host, he who brings life to music, Mr. Sean Comer. How do you do, sir?
Well, I'm more solid than a cast iron skillet. If your franchise bleeds, best believe we can kill it. We got so many sequels, prequels, and franchises. We got them all queuing. It's another jam-packed rush hour on the long road to ruin.
Very good. All right, so I took you up on your challenge there to try to end this show with I whooped Batman's ass, and then Blog Talk Radio is fighting me, I tell you.
Have you no sense of surprise?
Well, I would have surprised you if I could actually find the damn song in my host queue, but I uploaded it, and I don't see it. And I feel like Blog Talk Radio is doing this thing where it just periodically deletes music from my post queue.
Well, you know what? Blog Talk Radio can suck it, because in a couple of months we're moving on to doing this show via Google Hangouts anyway. So.
Yes, did I tell you my wife actually has agreed to edit all of our discussions to so that do all the video editing. So she, not that there's going to be a tremendous amount of it, but in as far as putting the audio to a title card for however long we need to be doing that, she said she'd do it for us.
Melissa Radulich, help yourself to a few internets. You deserve them.
Yeah, that's better than I whooped Batman's ass. By the way, I found the actual outro music, so we're in good shape. All right, so this is a special Long Road to Ruin, and it's not special because you're getting a behind-the-scenes look at how kerfuffle this show can get at times. It's special. It's special like a student in a self-contained classroom because we are going to depart from our usual motif, our usual status quo of talking about movie franchises, and we are going to sit and think about and discuss a single topic, and that topic is expansive, and that is the topic of comic book movies, specifically casting in these movies, and we are going to go off the beaten path, and of course, this was all spawned by the announcement earlier this week that Ben Affleck of Reindeer Games fame, has been cast as the Dark Knight himself, Batman, in what... Now, Sean, help me out here. Is it Man of Steel 2? Is it World's Finest? Is it Superman versus Batman? Is it Ham Sandwich? Is it Schmagegi? Is it The Dark Knight Returns? Is it Avengers? What are they calling this movie? Do you have any clue?
Well, fanboy emeritus, I can definitely tell you it's not going to be the Avengers. They haven't given an official title yet, so I don't really know what they're going to call it. I just know that all over the 411 Movie Zone, it's being listed as Man of Steel 2 every time there's an update. It's kind of like how when Thor, The Dark World, and Captain America, The Winter Soldier were in their early stages of development and didn't have titles yet. They were just Thor 2. They were Captain America 2. For all, until the Avengers was Avengers: The Rise of Ultron. We were just calling it Avengers 2. So for the time being, I guess it's just Man of Steel 2. Although if they're going with one particular storyline, pitting those two against each other at odds, I would quite like it if they would maybe attach that at least as a subtitle.
What?
Well, I mean, I don't know.
What do you want them? What do you want it subtitled as? Is it Man of Steel 2: World's Finest, Man of Steel 2: The Dark Knight Returns? What are we talking about here?
Well, I wouldn't go with The Dark Knight Returns because that's misleading. That's referring to what I think would be a completely opposite story. I don't know how you would really make a Superman movie and call it that, because that's more suited to just being a standalone Batman movie, and for that matter, one that Christopher Nolan kind of already made. So, I don't know, World's Finest has a nice ring to it.
I like World's Finest.
Yeah, you could do Man of Steel 2, Batman versus Superman if you want to.
Here's the problem. Superman versus Batman has a Freddy versus Jason ring to it.
What if you did Public Enemies?
That's a good one, depending on if they want to use that story. I like the idea. I hope they go with World's Finest, and I hope they actually don't call it Man of Steel 2. I just hope it's called World's Finest, and just leave it at that. But that might be a little too in geek for the mass public. I don't know, but where we're going with all of this, as I said, Ben Affleck was casted as Batman, and we're going to talk about that for a little while. But we're going to also talk about some of the other past and future comic book movies and their castings and some of the odd things that were done with these. But I really want to digest this whole idea. Now, let's get into this. When the announcement was made that Ben Affleck was cast as Batman, my reaction on Facebook was, well, there goes that movie. And I was one of approximately a zillion people who reacted to this. And it's very funny because I had a moderately negative reaction. There were people who had extremely negative reactions. And then you had the apologists and the contrarians and the ardent defenders of Ben Affleck. And it was the same argument. It was the same two arguments. It was, well, they said the same thing about Heath Ledger. They said the same thing about Michael Keaton. Haven't you seen Hollywoodland, The Town, and Argo? Those movies were fantastic. Ergo, Affleck is a fine casting choice for Batman. And I want to take each one of those in turn. But before we go any further, let me say, if you've heard me talk about this on the latest Casual Heroes movie/comic cast, the AFCast, as it was called, some of this is going to be a repeat of that discussion. Some of the points that I made with Jed and Gavin and, of course, Chris Evans. So pardon me if I sound like I'm repeating myself, but we're going to take some of those things that I brought up on the Casual Heroes and extrapolate further, since this is our podcast and we have that kind of time. So, Sean, let me sum up my reaction. We talked about this before we went on air last night, and before we went on air tonight. And then I want to kind of turn it over to you for your kind of reaction and explanation therein.
Sure.
When I saw that Affleck was cast as Batman, and I said, well, there goes that movie, it was not necessarily a reaction to Ben Affleck per se. I saw it more as a canary in the coal mine. I've already been extremely critical of Warner Brothers and their attempt to make DC movies. And look, I'm not going to continually say every time I've said something before, oh, I've said this before. Just, bear with me here. I feel like, and in some areas this has already been noted, that when Marvel and Disney decided that they were going to, the way forward was to do a series of interconnected movies that would culminate in a mass movie called The Avengers, as it happens in the comic where you had individual titles coalescing into one comic book. They had a plan. They had a roadmap. They knew what they were going to do with what movie, with what actors. They had all the actors committed to multiple projects, and they went from there. And so everything flowed pretty nicely. Some movies were hit or miss, but ultimately they stayed on the game plan. And there was much ballyhoo because of it. The Avengers was successful largely in part due to the fact that they stayed on the roadmap, and it was very clear from the get-go. From Iron Man forward, this was where, Avengers was the end of the first chapter, the first phase. And I feel like the people at Warner Brothers and to a lesser extent DC looked at that and only saw the end product. Hey, here's all these comic book characters that Disney and Marvel are making a fortune with. Forget doing Man of Steel 2, that continues the story that was started in Man of Steel 1, which is a topic I need to get into in just a moment. Let's do what they're doing. Let's throw Batman into the Man of Steel movie. And let's build towards a Justice League movie somewhere down the line. The problem, of course, with that is they've done a Green Lantern movie that isn't connected to this universe at all. They've done a Batman movie. They've done 3 of them, rather, that the story began and ended. It is not connected to this universe. And they've just started a new Superman, which doesn't lend itself to connecting to anything, which we'll talk about. So Ben Affleck is the least. The Ben Affleck is the least of their problems, though I think it's sort of suspect casting. My bigger problem with this whole World's Finest / Justice League project is that if you're talking about the Zack Snyder, Chris Nolan universe of gritty realism, what happens when you take magical creatures and put them in a gritty, realistic universe? What kinds of things do they have to contend with? What would this look like? Especially in the case of Superman. How then do you go ahead and connect that further to a larger Justice League movie? Where does Batman fit into all of that? Do you take the Batman from the Nolan trilogy, the one who retired, and bring him back? Is it going to be a continuation of that story? I mean, these are things that I don't think that they're asking themselves. They're just saying, hey, the Avengers made a lot of money. Batman made a lot of money. If we throw Batman into the Superman movie, phase 1, collect underpants. Phase 3, profit. That's my big issue here.
Okay, well, Warner Brothers has got a long road to hoe ahead of them if they're going to make this a successful movie. First off, to address the whole is Batman going to be connected to the Nolan trilogy thing, I think that can pretty safely be said as no. I think that, remind me, did David Goyer co-write Man of Steel? I don't think he did he?
I'll tell you in a second, but keep going.
Yeah. I mean, Nolan, he produced Man of Steel, but David Goyer didn't write it. So I don't think that this is going to be seen as a collaboration of the Dark Knight really meeting with the Man
of Steel screenplay was written by David Goyer.
Okay, he did write it. Okay, my mistake. It's possible, but I don't think so. I think that if they did that, not that it's the first time studio and filmmakers have ever lied, but The Dark Knight Rises was built up as being the conclusion to the trilogy, which meant, seemingly, okay, in this universe, Batman is done. This is his last act. This is Bruce Wayne's last act as the Caped Crusader. So I doubt it. They seem to be wanting to go in a direction with this by most indications of wanting to set this Batman entirely apart. It's an entirely different universe from the Nolanverse. That's really the least of the problems, though, because it's really the rest of the Justice League that concerns me in terms of building them up. Because, yeah, you're absolutely right. You can't connect the Green Lantern movie to this because Green Lantern fucking sucked, for one thing. Everybody has pretty much disowned that right up and down in a fashion that hasn't been seen since, well, Daredevil or that atrocious Halle Berry Catwoman movie. It's pretty much widely acknowledged. That was an absolute chunk of shit. Because Ryan Reynolds, in part because, I'm not going to go up on too much of a tangent on this, but because the story wasn't well told, the CGI was distractingly, almost humorously obvious, and Ryan Reynolds, while he looked the part of Hal Jordan, was the typically grating Van Wilder, Hannibal King Ryan Reynolds, which, quite frankly, that's a persona that, if anything, is more suited to the Flash than Green Lantern. So you got to work that out. that kind of hangs over their head kind of the same way getting the Incredible Hulk right really hung over the head of the Avengers. They had to go back and right that wrong. In the meantime, you've also got a couple other characters you've got to get to work on. You have to introduce audiences to the Flash, because they're not going to be nearly as familiar with, depending on which version you go with, Barry Allen or Wally West's origin story, as they're going to be with Superman or Batman or Wonder Woman or Green Lantern. I would dare say he might be kind of the least known of the bunch. And that's only because you're not trying to wedge guys like Green Arrow or Martian Manhunter into the equation. So you got to do that. That's very possible. And actually, quite frankly, I would love it. I would absolutely shit myself with glee if word would come out that David Goyer and Christopher Nolan and Zack Snyder all wanted to do a Flash movie and wanted to do it in the style of the short-lived one-season CBS drama, which unfortunately had the terrible, terrible misfortune of running up against NBC's most classic must-see TV lineup. I know it was must-see TV. I know it was running up against The Cosby Show almost every night. But it was also preempted constantly because of Gulf War coverage. And they tried resuscitating it a little bit over the summer of that year, but it couldn't quite be brought back from the dead. But it was dark. It was gritty. It was serious. It was fairly grounded in reality. My full confidence in Zack Snyder after seeing Man of Steel to be able to handle that. Merciful Christ, I don't know what they had to do to condition him. It was exactly what everybody knows he's capable of. And that's, for one thing, making a good movie without 3/5 of it being shot in slow-mo bullet time. He actually showed a little bit of restraint there. It was, as odd as it's going to sound, I think it's the closest thing we've gotten to Dawn of the Dead Zack Snyder since, well, Dawn of the fucking Dead. Then after you do that, okay, so you've made your apologist Green Lantern movie. You've managed to get that right. You've done the Flash, and let's be optimistic and suppose that maybe the Flash kind of becomes the Thor of this series, the surprisingly good movie, for it being a fairly unknown commodity. Okay.
Can I put you on pause there? Before you continue, I want you to think about this as you formulate your next couple of thoughts. In a world established in Man of Steel and in the Nolan trilogy, whether they continue that or not, they've decided that there is no magic in this universe. It's not the Marvel universe where monsters and magic exist along with reality, and it's all accepted, and therefore everything is on the table. DC, for some strange reason, and Warner Brothers to an extent, have decided this is a universe with no magic. The focus of Man of Steel was not on Superman and his great abilities. It was, how does an alien with God abilities handle living among mortals, and what does that do? What does that do to him? How do you then take that forward to Wonder Woman, Queen of the Amazon, and Aquaman, King of Atlantis? Because I can almost deal with, in the same manner that you're dealing with Superman as an alien. You can say, okay, well, Martian Manhunter is an alien too, and the Green Lantern got his ring from an army of alien guardians. I can almost deal with that. Now you're, again, with Wonder Woman and to a lesser extent Aquaman, now you are starting to deal in a territory that they just told you with these movies isn't something they want to deal with.
Well, then you know what? Here is where DC is really behind wanting to do a Justice League movie. If they want to do it right, they're going to have to bite the goddamn bullet. Because the simple fact is, you can't, okay, Aquaman is somewhat expendable. I think you could very easily do a Justice League movie without Aquaman. Hell, they did 4 years, about 2.5 of them pretty good. of a Justice League animated series wherein Aquaman was an occasional recurring character. He was a badass, but he was just a recurring character. It can be done. Now, when it comes to Wonder Woman, yeah, you're going to have to bite the bullet on this one. You're going to have to maybe let Zach, with a little bit of restraint with the goddamn slow-mo, go back to his tone of his 300 adaptation, and kind of approach Wonder Woman that way, possibly. Except maybe not quite so darkly, but a little bit of that same visual style. The thing is, this is the one that mystifies me. I don't know why there's been so many circles of development hell that have surrounded getting a damn good theatrical Wonder Woman movie off the ground. I don't get that. I mean, well, it's like we talked about the other day on Facebook.
Hollywood doesn't like girls.
Bullshit.
I don't. Hollywood hates women. Women are only good for one thing in Hollywood, and that's boobs. That's the lesson I've been taught, at least, by watching some of these movies. I
disagree, but we can get to that down the line. No. The problem with it is, and you and I talked about this on Facebook, the DC Animated Universe Wonder Woman movie, the full-length one, that right there, you just took your full-length Wonder Woman live-action movie and you animated it. You pretty much wasted it. You kind of blew your wad on that one. That was a well-done origin story. It was well-acted, well-written. It had bits of humor. It had action. It had, toward the end of it, Wonder Woman trying to just start to make the adjustment into the world of humans, into the world of men. You introduced her to Steve Trevor right off the bat. Now, what's more is, okay, suppose you don't want to tell that story. Suppose you want to tell a different one. Okay, one of the most legendary, revered pairings of writer and character in the annals of comic books, Gail Simone and Wonder Woman. You have your stories, plethoras of them, right there. You have a producer helming this who is a master, clearly, at adaptation, of making sometimes pastiches of highly regarded, epic, pivotal storylines into one movie that still makes sense. You have a director that you know full well can handle this kind of movie. Just warning you, though, Zach, if you get to make this and you give us Sucker Punch, so help me God, I will lead the charges of torches and pitchforks to your door. It shouldn't be this hard. It just shouldn't be this damn difficult.
But now you see why I said Affleck is the least of their problems. I don't buy Affleck as the menacing Batman in the least bit, but I'm at least waiting. I'm at least willing to wait and see how it turns out. My problem is that I think Warner Brothers consistently focuses on the wrong elements, and they look at DC as not the Tiffany product that it could be, but rather this sort of lowbrow, this lowbrow kiddie property that seems to be something they feel like, as long as we put something out there, it'll make millions, and we don't have to put any effort into this.
No. I'm sorry. I'm not even going to dignify that with the Dr. Cox song. No, I know DC knows better, because with that general description, you know what you just described that they could have taken that way, but they didn't, and it was one of the most lucrative, successful, beloved film franchises in that studio's history. You more or less just described how a lesser studio could have approached Harry fucking Potter.
Then tell me, Sean, in 50 words or less, why is it, as you just said, they can't seem the problems with Superman have been going on for years now. Since really after Superman 3. We all know the disaster that was Superman 4 after they dumped the property. There was all kinds of problems that finally led to Superman Returns, and then after Superman Returns, there continued to be problem after problem after problem trying to figure out what to do with it, and eventually they just dumped it. Not to mention, we've talked about, because we did an entire podcast on it, the crashing of the Batman franchise that had to be rejuvenated with Nolan's trilogy. And don't get me wrong, Warner Brothers was obviously behind the Nolan trilogy too, so not everything is a complete farce. But I'm failing to understand, what is it about? Where is the disconnect? Because I think DC by itself would be fine. How they can get their animated movies right and their live action movies wrong so much baffles me. But that's
okay.
My point. I don't know where the disconnect is between DC and Warner Brothers.
Okay, well, let's take a look and see if we can maybe figure things out here. But let's take a look at the last 6 live-action superhero movies that Warner Brothers has been put in charge of. Superman Returns. Superman Returns sucked. All kinds of sucked. I don't think it would have been any better if Brett Ratner would have been in charge than if Bryan Singer would have been in charge, because you would have still had the terrible casting, Kevin Spacey accepted. You would have still had the shitty script. You would have still had the shitty story. You would have still had the plot holes. You would have still had everything else. It's just that the douchebag from the Rush Hour movies would be in charge instead of the genius who gave the world the first 2 X-Men movies and The Usual Suspects. Right around the same time, we got Batman Begins, which was the beginning of putting the series in the capable hands of Christopher Nolan and David Goyer and star Christian Bale and the various other returning cast. And the result was regarded as maybe a little financially disappointing, but it was seen as a vast step in the right direction to getting the ship right. Then we got The Dark Knight. What more do we say about that hasn't already been said?
Right. It's universally loved.
Yeah, it is going to go down as pretty much the quintessential great superhero movie, and rightfully so. Then, between that and The Dark Knight Rises, we got Green Lantern.
Okay. So far we're 2 and 2.
Yeah, which was terribly ill-conceived. And throughout this, I should also add, we also got a nice combination of lots of really good DC animated movies. In fact, just pretty much hit after hit after hit after hit, with the exception of Superman Day.
I'm excluding the animated because I feel like those seem to be more in the hands of the DC people, and Warner Brothers just cranks out the videos. And the studio executives seem to get involved solely in the live-action projects, which are right now batting 500 by your count.
Sure. Okay, then we get The Dark Knight Rises. It wasn't perfect. It was nowhere near as good as The Dark Knight. It was a little better than Batman Begins. Well, I don't know, depending on who you ask, and even depending on when I've watched it.
Most people would agree that Dark Knight Rises. It's one of those. It's kind of like Natural Born Killers, where the first time you're like, "Wow, that was great," because you're sitting there and it's sort of a theater experience, and then you watch, second or third time you're watching this, the whole thing starts to fall apart.
Oh, okay, fair enough. So playing devil's advocate here and going along with that. Suppose it's the least of the 3 movies, and it's still pretty damn good. I don't agree with anybody.
It was an interesting idea, but it was not well executed.
But I don't agree with anybody who would call that a bad movie. I thought it was still fairly effective. And then, of course, after that, we got Man of Steel. And Man of Steel has given Superman a new lease on box office life.
Says you. And I say says you as being one of these people who was ardently defending the movie. But look, let's much like The Dark Knight Rises, there are legions of people out there who thought Man of Steel was terrible. And they range from folks who are friends of mine whose taste in movies I have almost no respect for, to movie reviewers such as the Red Letter Media folks who I respect wholeheartedly, who absolutely trashed that movie. And it became a matter of, well, what kind of Superman were you expecting in this thing? And what is your tolerance for different interpretations of Superman?
You know what? When it comes to reviewers like Red Letter Media, and I say this as somebody who, anybody who's listened to the show for a while knows, I'm a product of online reviewer culture. That's what inspired me to do exactly what we're doing right now. You can chalk that up to my fandom of Doug Walker and Lindsay Ellis and Noah Antweiler, going far enough back. But I will also admit that sometimes, depending on which reviewer you listen to, they get a little more hung up on being snarky and negative for the sake of being entertaining. Personally, yeah, I absolutely think that Man of Steel was the new perspective on the franchise that it needed. It was the new approach that it needed, that particular franchise needed. So,
and frankly, I agree with you, but not everybody does. There are a lot of people who when Man of Steel was coming up, for some odd reason, despite the trailer seemingly showing you what this movie was going to be, how you're not mentally prepared for that is still beyond me, but I digress. People were expecting the 5th or 6th installment of the Christopher Reeve series. I'm not joking about that. They wanted, and just remember, folks, that flying is still the safest way to travel. They were, they wanted to see Henry Cavill do his best Christopher Reeve impression. I had friends that were joking about this on the way to Man of Steel, but despite me telling them, I'm like, no, guys, this is a real, examination of what it's going to be like for a god to walk among men and what that does to someone's psyche. And they're like, no, it'll be this and this and this and this, and they were making fun of essentially the Superman origin. The thing of it is that they're not alone. They're not a minority. I would say it was half the people that's why the movie didn't do as well, is when word got out that this was going to be what I described it as and not what they thought it would be, people went, oh, fuck it, I don't want to see that. I don't want to see depressing Superman. I mean, my God, he kills Zod, spoiler alert. He kills Zod at the end of that movie, which to this day I defend as a choice, and I wasn't particularly jarred by. I remember talking about this with Harris. It was an interesting choice, and I thought they set it up well. And everyone freaked the fuck out because of it. Oh my God, Superman killed Zod, who had already killed, millions of people by that point, and he couldn't stand to let him kill, one more person. And so he made a choice. And I said to Harris at the time, if they explore that choice a little bit more in the next movie, then I think it's all worth it. If they just drop it, then that's a wasted opportunity. But everything I just said, there are people out there who are going to listen to this and going, yeah, and I want to see none of that. I want to see Superman catching Lois Lane as she throws herself out a window. That's what I want to see.
Okay, fair enough. Now, let me tell all of you people, listen to reason on what I'm about to say, because if you pay attention, it's pretty hard to dispute. The best movies Warner Brothers has put out, and I'm going to expand on this in a second because it goes back to something you said at the start of the show, are the ones that actually let themselves borrow from the very earliest and best source material, and that is the fucking comics. Yes, you can argue all you want to. These aren't made for the fanboys. Okay, fair point. They're not. The other thing that you can argue is if you sit somebody down And with almost any given franchise, where you have them watch the movies that Hollywood made where they either completely ignored or strayed, at best strayed significantly from the source material or stories of the comics and tried to just do their own thing because they insisted they could do it better. And then you have them go and read the same characters' very best regarded comic stories. I guarantee you, almost every single time, they will tell you, okay, the comic stories were actually better written, better executed, and I enjoyed them more. Because, quite frankly, Hollywood gets this hang-up. Well, not all of them, but most of them get a hang-up and they're trying to adapt something from another medium. Whether it's a book, whether it's a video game, whether it's a comic book, a TV series, whatever.
Well, it's an act of self-preservation, isn't it? If we just do a straight extrapolation of a comic book or a book, what the hell do we need screenwriters for?
Well, but that's the thing, though, is no, you do need screenwriters because a lot of those stories, you do have to trim some things that are just either not going to translate well to film, they're unfilmable, they mess with the pacing, they just don't fit the format, what have you. I could point to the six Scott Pilgrim books as a great example of that, as well as a number of other graphic novels and comic books. However, the thing these writers get in their head is that movies are clearly the superior medium, and we can tell any of these stories better than they were told in their original format. And what ends up happening, and there have been rare occasions, and they are rare, when the movie has actually been better. I would point to the Tekken movie as being a good example of that. The live action movie completely disregarded almost the entire plot of the video games and actually ended up making a better movie than what we ultimately got when the makers of Tekken helmed an animated movie that stuck strictly to the game storyline, and it was a nonsensical, fucked up piece of shit. But for the most part, what you have here is the movies I just mentioned, the successful ones. Let's break this down, shall we? Superman Returns, not rooted whatsoever in the source material. In fact, it contradicts a good number of the movies that came before it. It can't even keep its own series continuity straight. Batman Begins. Okay, you're basically telling an adaptation of the Batman...
Year One.
Yeah, thank you. The Batman Year One story. You're getting an adaptation of that arc. And the way Nolan adapted it was extremely effective. Dark Knight. Okay. For the most part, it's an adaptation of The Long Halloween with...
It's a mashup. It's a mashup of
Yeah.
The Long Halloween and The Dark Knight Returns without the Returns part.
Well, no,
well, you've
Dark
got,
Knight...
Come on. You've got the Sons of Batman stuff. You know, you've got there were elements of the Dark Knight that were sort of mashed into the Long Halloween.
I'll grant you that one. Yeah, but for the most part, our Dark Knight Returns story, that was the Dark Knight Rises combined with Nightfall.
No,
okay,
that was other elements of the Dark Knight Rises combined with the Savage Land combined with Nightfall, and a very little bit of Nightfall.
Okay, well, I'm just going with the most obvious ones that I remember, folks. I'll go ahead and say this right up front. I know my comics fairly well. Mark knows them a lot better than I do. So he's
probably because I've been reading them more recently.
Yeah, and
I don't want to take undue credit here.
and he's probably right. And occasionally we'll get a line like, say, we'll get a line from The Killing Joke in in The Dark Knight. And but it all works because they've taken the time to actually understand the source material. The cast has, and the filmmakers have. Then you've got Man of Steel, which is just once more just kind of taking his origin story and retelling it, but you're also adding a lot of the elements of what are the best Superman stories, and they're the ones that you just described. Any story where it takes a little bit closer psychological examination of what it's like for Superman to be a god walking and living among men. The first one that comes to mind along that tone is, kind of Kingdom Come, actually. And those are the ones that suck people in the most without people even realizing that they're retelling classic comic and one-shot and prestige format and graphic novel stories. So those are the ones that work. Then on the other hand, take a look at a movie like Green Lantern. Okay, you retold the origin story, which, by the way, is getting a little tiresome with every comic movie that comes out.
I want to get back to that in just a minute, but I want you to, because we started off with where is the disconnect between the DC animated, basically between the DC leaders and the Warner Brothers executives. Where is that disconnect that they can't get the live action stuff right more often than not?
Allow me to get to that. It comes down to the hands that you're putting the properties into. And it comes down to the studio needs to put some importance on entrusting these characters and these stories to people who have some regard for tone and a certain unity of the tone of this universe where possible, even though you're going to have to stray from it sometimes if you're going to do characters like Green Lantern and Wonder Woman in particular within this universe. And not trying to put too much undue emphasis, I should say, on the flashiness that weighed down movies like Green Lantern because they took away from the story. They took so much away from the story. But granted, it was, and I say this having read it recently, it's certainly better than the Silver Age issues that started on Green Lantern story, that those are a little hammy and they're products of their time. But still, the fact is, I actually bothered to sit down and sit through Green Lantern the other day. It's so much less engaging in most ways.
Well, look, if it wasn't called Green Lantern, it would have been stock superhero movie starring smarky Ryan Reynolds, and people wouldn't have had as much of a problem with it. The problem with it was the problem with that movie, aside from the Phantom Menace level CGI, was almost the same way that there was a problem with his portrayal of Deadpool, which is Ryan Reynolds can't stop being Ryan Reynolds. Ryan Reynolds failed to capture the spirit of Hal Jordan, just as he failed to capture the spirit of Deadpool, and instead he was the same character he played in Waiting.
You know what? If you were to cast Ryan Reynolds, Denzel Washington, Liv Tyler, and Ryan Reynolds all in the same movie, it would be the easiest paychecks any of them ever collected. What the hell? Just for comic relief, I'm going to throw Michael Cera and Jack Black in there too. But here's the thing, though, and the thing to remember about Green Lantern is this. Okay, you mentioned that DC takes charge of its animated movies, and the DC movies are generally great. Okay, DC also did a Green Lantern origin story, Green Lantern First Flight, and it was excellent. Even for being an origin story, and I'm not necessarily a big fan of them. Even for an origin story, it was really good. So, and that's because they have some respect, and believe me, I do stress some respect. Yeah, I've read some of New 52 for their properties, and they want them to do well. They have an understanding of them at the very least, so they're able to get it right. That's a concept that Warner Brothers, for God knows what reason, just doesn't seem to grasp entirely, and that's why it seems like for every great job that Christopher Nolan and David Goyer do with really getting to the bottom of these characters, we get some stupid shit like Green Lantern and Jonah Hex.
Okay, let me just moving the conversation along. I want to say this. I think that what's been talked about for the longest time now is that they've wanted to do a Justice League movie. They just wanted to do a Justice League movie, and then they got the idea of, no, let's just not do the Justice League movie. Let's do a bunch of interconnected movies that end in the Justice League, just like they did with the Avengers. I think Warner Brothers needed to stick to their game plan and just do a Justice League movie. Don't do a Man of Steel 2. Don't do anything with Man of Steel. Man of Steel should have been its own standalone picture, and then they should have, if they wanted Henry Cavill in something else, they just should have gone ahead and done a Justice League movie. Now I'm going to explain how and why in just a moment, but I said this on Facebook, and folks like Jeff Harris completely disagreed with me. And Jeff Harris, to his credit, his argument was, you're setting up for fan confusion. You're setting up for audience confusion. People are not familiar enough with these characters. You haven't established anything, and if you just go ahead and do a Justice League movie, you're going to have an audience that isn't with you. To which I say, that's nonsense. If by this point in 2013 you haven't heard of The Flash, Wonder Woman, and Green Lantern, then you're not going to see this movie no matter what they do with it. Okay? You've heard of these people before. You have some inkling of what they do. You at least know Wonder Woman has an invisible jet. Why? Because we all watch the Super Friends show. That's why. You know Green Lantern has a ring that does magic. And you know the Flash runs fast. Really? You don't need to know anything more about them than that. There's an animated movie that is the template for how they could have done a Justice League live-action movie. And had I been in Warner Brothers in charge of doing DC movies, this is what I would have done. I would have said to a screenwriter, go watch that movie and turn that into a live-action screenplay, changing one or two items, but basically tell the story of how a villain of some sort, referring to themselves as the Legion of Doom, uses Batman's plans against the Justice League against the Justice League, and have it end where Batman walks out on them. That's all you need. People will be with you. That's a compelling story. The story between Batman and the rest of the Justice League, where he acknowledges the fact that they're a team of gods, and if there isn't a way to stop them, the Earth could be in some serious trouble. And then anger at Batman and not trusting them. That's great dramatic tension. And that is what you need in a movie. Who the fuck cares about any of these people's origins? I don't. And most of the viewing audience doesn't either. Give them a story they can follow and some pretty good action scenes. Voila! You've got yourself a hit. This doesn't need to be more complicated than that.
You know what? I'll take you a step further. I will see that, and I will actually raise you an idea for an additional 3 movies. I agree. Justice League Doom, that could have been your live-action script right there. That was a damn good concept. It got pretty much all the core members of the Justice League in there. However, I would also point out that what you could also do is you could then take the general consistent arc of the last season of Justice League Unlimited. And quite frankly, I think that would, if you really wanted to extend out your franchise to what's would almost be considered an unhealthy number of movies. You could take that and probably even get up to 5 movies doing that story if you just took just that arc and just really polished it, really hammered it out. Because, spoilers for those of you who have never seen it, which, by the way, Justice League and Justice League Unlimited, all 4 seasons, all available on Netflix. Highly recommend you go watch them, but be really patient through the first season of Justice League Unlimited. You have a storyline in which, in the previous season, Lex Luthor had managed to be merged with the consciousness of Brainiac and was hell-bent, was obsessed with actually managing to resuscitate, to rebuild Brainiac, to restore him fully to life. And this was all going on amid a power struggle with Gorilla Grodd over control of the Legion of Doom. And ultimately what it ends with, it ends actually with a surprise battle with Darkseid, which was a great 2-part series finale. And that I think on film would be absolutely breathtaking. It would be amazing. It would be the appearance of Darkseid in a live-action movie that I've been hoping for years now. Instead, I keep getting Lex Luthor rehashes.
And Zod. Don't forget Zod.
Yes, and Zod. Yes, Michael Shannon did a wonderful job with Zod. I have to give him that.
And Richard Pryor's Brainiac.
Fuck you. Anyway, right there, you've got the possibility of something you could extend out to 5 movies if you wanted to.
Well, isn't that the platform right there? You just go ahead and do a Justice League movie, and then after that, you can spend time with each one of these individuals. Then you can do another solo Superman movie with Cavill, and then you can do a Batman movie with whoever you wish to, Ben Affleck, and let him go do his own Batman movie in this new universe you set up. And then you can spend time with Wonder Woman. Fuck, I would love to see a Batman Brave and the Bold, where in that movie they also bring in, like, Green Arrow. Some of these other characters that existed in the Batman universe. What's his face? Bring back Gordon Levitt and let him be Nightwing. Things like that. Huh?
I could live with Joseph Gordon-Levitt as Nightwing. Sure.
Yeah. So that's my point. Is if they had just instead of doing a Batman Superman movie, which again, to take it back to the beginning of this conversation that we started an hour ago, is I think going to just blow up on the launch pad. They should have just done a Justice League movie, and then from that, let that be the fertile soil from which they can grow multiple movies, and then coalesce back with Injustice. Okay?
Good idea.
Or do Darkseid. Do Darkseid's invasion of the Earth. That's something big enough for the Justice League to have to deal with. Then boom, more movies with more people. You got Hawkgirl, Martian Manhunter, Cyborg, the New Titans. There's all kinds of directions you can go in a Phase 2 DC universe. Bring it back again, then do Injustice. And Injustice you do in 3 parts. You do, the downfall of Superman, the rise of Superman, and then, the video game, essentially, which was, by itself, a great movie.
And now, you know what? Now you got my mind drifting, and I'm just thinking, oh, God, Titans, please, Warner Brothers, one day, get your shit together and give me a live-action adaptation of the Judas Contract. No, for all of you who are saying it, I do not mean like what the animated series did. No, I mean as depicted in the comic books, where Kara is a horrible, vile, inhuman monster of a manipulator. By all means, oh God, yes, give me that. I can't believe nobody's thought to try that yet. That would be fantastic.
So we're all in agreement here. Ben Affleck, while it's not, as some put it, inspiring casting, look, the man can act. It's not his fault Daredevil sucked. You know, and he's been in, and yes, he's been in some shitty movies, but he wasn't particularly shitty in those movies. Again, I don't blame Reindeer Games on him in particular. I just think that Warner Brothers focuses so much on Tiffany casting, and they seem to neglect the backbone of a good motion picture, and that is a plot. So therefore, what you get is this crippled mess that looks really, really good, but is in fact shit.
Yeah, you know, allow me to expound, hopefully as briefly as I can, on my opinions on Ben Affleck. Ben Affleck, historically, has shown himself to actually be an outstanding actor. ...
He was the bombs in Phantom, yo.
Stop cutting me off. In movies that he has co-written, written, or directed. In others, face it, it's hit or miss. Even looking at the ones where he was good, yes, okay, Phantoms was an anomaly.
So wait, I hear what you're saying. He's the male Uma Thurman.
Well, kind of, because you could, people will point to Good Will Hunting, but you know what? No, that was more Robin Williams, Minnie Driver, and Matt Damon, and Affleck did pretty well with the minimal amount that he really had to do. Chasing Amy, you could give him credit for that. However, I think you have to give more of the credit to Kevin Smith being an outstanding writer, and Joey Lauren Adams and Jason Lee being the more colorful performances in that. Otherwise, you know, Ben was Ben. But otherwise, and you know what? Fine, I'm just going to fucking say it. No, I don't completely absolve him of fault for Daredevil. Suck it, fanboys. No, he doesn't completely get off the hook. Because he sounded like a dull, uninspired, there for the paycheck, dude bro, Matt Murdock. Yeah, he was physically appropriate for the role, and he had a couple lines he delivered well, but quite frankly, it wasn't what I expected for somebody who arguably has got one of the most miserable, cursed existences in the entirety of the Marvel Universe. He just never seemed that into it, and by comparison, okay, talking about the power of good casting, what saved Daredevil from becoming the Fantastic Four, in my opinion, you may thank Colin Farrell and the late Michael Clark Duncan for that. Because Colin Farrell was an absolute scene stealer as Bullseye. He was so damn much fun throughout the entire movie that he saved it from the vast miasma of boredom that was Ben Affleck and Jennifer Garner. And Michael Clark Duncan, okay, one of the rare examples where by necessity they swapped out the race of a character, and I'll be damned, it worked. It really worked because Duncan was just that imposing. The man was the kingpin. And to think that he was probably in part cast because you couldn't name a Caucasian actor in Hollywood that was built physically and had the presence to take on that role.
John Candy.
Who had been dead for nigh on 10 years by that time. Are you retarded?
Chris Farley.
Also, long since dead.
Rob Reiner.
Did you say Carl Reiner?
Yes, but Rob Reiner.
I'm not even going to justify that.
Anyway, in my defense, I suggested two actors that would have been better than Affleck, both of which were dead: Jack Lemmon and Walter Matthau.
Actually, yes, you did. But you know, the thing is, Affleck looks the part. I will give him that.
Really, I disagree. I think he looks like Bruce Wayne. I am about as frightened of him as Batman as I would be of Lily as Batman, and I'm pretty sure she could throw a better kick.
Okay, now here's the thing, though. Here's where I ask you to kind of cut him some slack on that. How familiar are you with the story of what went into the making of Batman Begins?
For the sake of this conversation, we'll say nothing because I want to hear what you have to say.
Okay, allow me to elaborate. Prior to Batman Begins, and this is why you don't want to underestimate what somebody can do physically to get into character. Christian Bale went and made a little movie called The Machinist. A very dark, suspenseful thriller in which he had to play a mentally troubled insomniac who's been coping with it for quite some time. He got his weight, and keep in mind, Bale is not a small guy. He's 6 foot+. He got his weight clear down to, I believe, at its lowest, between 100 and 105 pounds.
Oof.
To play that role. And keep in mind, he was committed at that time already to do Batman Begins. He turned around after stripping away all that weight, in which, for months at a time, he dieted on nothing but coffee and an apple per day.
Oof, that's not healthy.
For the most part. No, it's not. He basically sent his body crashing, and in the movie, it looks horrific. Now, within less than a year, I seem to recall, I believe it was within the space of about 6 to 8 months, he packed on north of 100 pounds of muscle to get into shape to play Batman. In fact, what ended up happening was actually when he came in for the part and he was ready to get to work on it, he actually had to drop some weight. He overshot what he was going to have to put on to play the role because they felt, well, no, now actually you look too bulky. You look too muscular. So I believe he had to take something like 10, 15, maybe as much as 20 pounds off to get back in shape.
I'm not disputing that Ben Affleck won't put on the muscle mass. I don't care if he looks like the Ultimate Warrior. I don't buy Ben Affleck as menacing.
Well, and that's going to be the X factor. And I've pointed this out to several people. My problem with Affleck is in so many roles. Again, he comes across as kind of a laid-back dude bro. And that's not what I want to hear coming out of Batman's mouth. When as you put it, he's got Superman by the throat. And what was the line? I'm the one who beat you?
Yeah, no. When you close your eyes, know this: I'm the one that beat you.
Yeah, thank you.
You don't want to hear, Superman. This is fucking hard being the Batman.
Yeah, exactly. I don't.
Sorry to Jed from the Casual Heroes, whose imitation of a Southie Batman I just murderized.
No, because you know what? The last thing in the world I want to hear in a Batman movie is Batman sounding like fucking Holden McNeil. That's not what I want to hear. I don't even want to hear Bartleby from Dogma. No, and I won't say that I necessarily want to hear that goofy fucking growl of Christian Bale's either.
I was going to say, I want to hear Chris Barnes from Cannibal Corpse as Batman, the way Chris Bale portrayed him. But, like I said, Christian Bale's Batman was, at least for the first two movies, was legitimately menacing. We'll see what happens with Affleck. I want to talk a little bit about some other movies, casting choices. Let's talk a little bit about the Fantastic Four for just a moment. Because that's due for a reboot under Sony, who still owns the property, as I recall. They still own X-Men. I mean, correct me if I'm wrong on the studio, but I'm fairly certain this is all Sony.
Wait, no. Fox has Fantastic Four.
Okay, so Fox has X-Men and the Fantastic Four.
Right. The way I understand it right now, it breaks down like this. Fox has still got X-Men and Fantastic Four. Sony has got Spider-Man. And I think everything else by this point has reverted back to Marvel because I think their rights lapsed. I know for a fact Daredevil has. I'm pretty sure the Punisher has. Although, God, please never let me see Disney try to take on the Punisher. God in heaven, no. Because Welcome Back, Frank is one of my all-time favorite stories, and I just want that left at the pretty good version that Thomas Jane delivered of it.
Let's put it this way: Punisher works better as a villain in a Spider-Man movie than he does in a standalone movie. It was fine in the comic books, because for those of us who wanted a dark murderer running around shooting people and decided that was a good idea for a comic book, it was fine. As far the problem with the Punisher, whether it was Dolph Lundgren or whoever the hell played him in War Journal, or the Punisher movie they shot in Tampa, or as I call it, the Punisher starring Kevin Nash in Tampa.
I like James Burton. Bite your tongue, boy.
Oh, I mean, it's fine. It's no Ghost Rider Spirit of Vengeance, but it was a fine little movie. The problem is the Punisher's a villain, and the Punisher's a guy running around with a gun shooting people. I don't think that. I mean, Christ Almighty, we were supposed to talk about Rambo tonight, and if they did the Punisher as and the Punisher, or rather Rambo, only works in to a degree in some ways. He doesn't necessarily work in the context of a superhero movie. But I don't want to. I want to get back to the Fantastic Four for just a second.
Okay.
The Fantastic Four in its original incarnation, with the two movies that came out, was lighthearted fare, and I think they mostly got the tone right. They certainly, at least, except for Jessica Alba, got the casting right. I thought. Wasn't particularly impressed with Dr. Doom, but I think that also that was more with the way he was written than necessarily the acting. But I think if they're going to do a Fantastic Four reboot, which I believe is the plan, is they're going to continue with the X-Men franchise in whatever form it takes. I know Days of Future Past is sort of a best of the previous X-Men movies combined with the X-Men First Class movies, which is fine. But somewhere along the line, the X-Men and the Fantastic Four are supposed to be part of a connected universe. I don't think you can find another actor that was better than Michael Chiklis as the Thing. They need to work on his costume a bit. They're obviously going to need to find a new Human Torch, but I'm pretty sure they can find Ryan Reynolds would have been fine as the Human Torch. Then he can just be Ryan Reynolds, and it works just fine. The problem with Fox and the way they casted Sue Storm was yes, she was blonde and attractive, I suppose. It's a comic book. It was kind of hard to tell. But she was also a very mousy woman who isn't until much later on in the Fantastic Four, where despite the fact that she's had superpowers for decades now, finally finds a backbone. And it's through a lot of heartache and heartbreak as the team fought challenge after challenge after challenge, not the least of which was having their children taken from them. So, or almost taken from them. So, and then whatever guy with the weird name playing Mr. Fantastic, he was fine too. I'm excited for the concept of a Fantastic Four reboot, but it's got to be handled by somebody who really knows how to write sci-fi. And I don't mean Sharknado. I mean real sci-fi. Somebody who really understands what the Fantastic Four was doing, especially in the early days. They got away from being a subset of the Avengers almost, and became sort of their own team, which was very much engrossed in sci-fi. The Fantastic Four were always fighting aliens. They were going into other planets. I would love to see them bring to life the trial of Reed Richards. Something along those lines, I think, would be really fantastic. No pun intended. But in terms of casting, like I said, they gotta bring in a blonde woman, or a person whose hair at least they can dye blonde, who isn't a sex pot. Who isn't some young chippy. Don't bring in Miley Cyrus. You know what I mean? But get somebody A, with some acting chops, and B, who has that potential to be an absolute force of nature, but is holding all of it in because of who she is as a person. I mean, almost one of the few things the old Fantastic Four movie got right with the terrible stop motion animation was the Sue Storm who was the woman who played Sue Storm in that movie. Granted, not much. You can't say much else about that movie that was good, but the person who played Sue Storm actually captured the spirit of that character.
You know what? The Fantastic Four is all at once an example of casting done right and casting and writing done horribly. To go right down the line, Ian Grufold, I pray I'm pronouncing his name right, was Mr. Fantastic. That was perfect in everything from mannerisms to speech to character to the very look of it. Exactly the way I imagine Mr. Fantastic should look. Michael Chiklis, bravo. Spot the fuck on as the Thing. By all means, please bring him back for the reboot. I'm begging. Just retcon the entire first two movies if you have to. Get him back to play the Thing. Chris Evans as the Human Torch? Fuck it. It's not popular to say it. He was perfect as it. He was exactly what Johnny Storm is supposed to be.
He's also the most expendable cast. There are about 3,000 men in Hollywood who could have done that role and done it perfectly. Again,
yes, but
you could get Ryan Reynolds, get James Franco, get any one of these hotsy-totsy cover boy actors in there, and here's what you have to do. You're on fire most of the time, and when you're not on fire, you're either poking fun at the Thing or you're being an all-around jerk-off.
Okay,
the casting call for that would cause a riot in Hollywood.
Okay, first off, let's just acknowledge right now the ceiling for James Franco's talent is about 2 or 3 stories lower than anybody at first estimated it would be. Number 2, I absolutely loved the chemistry between Chris Evans and Michael Chiklis. I thought it was great. Now, and yes, Jessica Alba as Sue Storm. Yeah, no. Sue Storm is supposed to be the den mother of the group. She's supposed to be the voice of reason in many instances. And also, that's supposed to be Johnny Storm's older sister. Chris Evans looked to be a good 2, 3, even 4 years older than her. It just looked off, especially since, look at it, you gotta think, gee, Reed, that you're kind of creepy for wanting that. I kind of want to get the other end of the room from you. I kind of want to make you stretch as far as you have to have a conversation with me, because you're kind of skeezy now.
So who would you put in the role of Sue Storm? I think you need to get somebody in there. I don't remember how much younger than Reed she was, but you figure if Reed's 40, she's 30. If Reed's 30, she's 20. I don't know what the exact ages were in the comic book, but that at least works for me. He was significantly older than she was, but not old enough where you had to call the police. So
you know what? To be perfectly honest, I think Jennifer Garner might have worked.
Yeah. How about Liv Tyler?
Liv Tyler would be my second choice, but that would also be good. Either one would be able to act circles, hexagons, polygons, cubes, fucking melting Salvador Dali paintings around Jessica Alba. But
how about John Candy?
What in the fuck that stays crispy and milk is it with you and John Candy?
I don't know. Look, after almost a year of doing this, don't you realize that once I find a running gag, I like to beat it into the ground? As Sam Ricotti once said, I am the living embodiment of Family Guy. I find a joke that's funny, beat it till it's unfunny, and then continue to beat it until it's funny again.
Well, I must admit, Saban did suplex a train.
Ta-da! Long road to ruin, everybody.
But really, the pivotal point for that movie, the one where kind of you get a case of good casting meets horrible writing and concept of character, is actually Dr. Doom. Don't get me wrong. I like Julian McMahon. I actually think he's a pretty good actor. God knows that he was one of the few bright spots in 8 seasons of Charmed. And actually, I think there was a lot of mileage they could have gotten out of a fairly evil, conflicted character that he played. They just never went and ran with, and that's supposedly a big reason why he left. In this movie, though, that talent is wasted by having him essentially just play his character from Nip Tuck the entire time. Because Dr. Doom was not some chummy, slimy old associate of Reed Richards. No, he was the ruler of a goddamn country.
But did he start off that way? Because I thought that came out down the line. Because initially Marvel wrote, I want to say Marvel wrote Dr. Doom as just a villain. It wasn't until years later that he was like a super genius and then ruler of Latvia.
Well,
I mean, maybe I'm wrong about that. Some of the old comic aficionados will technically, I'm waiting for some our good friend to call in any moment now and tell me where I'm wrong with this. But I remember there being a Doctor Doom who was just Doctor Doom, and he was a bad guy with an iron mask. And then and then it was down the line when he became the guy, the evil genius and dictator of Latvia.
Oh, you know what? I'm sure right now Jeff is already napalming your Facebook over this. Anyway.
Yeah, well, I do want to talk about the Hulk, so I'm going to give him a reason to napalm my Facebook page, but let's finish up with the Fantastic Four.
Okay, fine. The whole point being is he is supposed to be the ultimate elitist. This is the guy, I was talking about this with my friend Cole on Facebook last night. This was a guy that came crashing through a wall in one book. Spider-Man asks him something to the effect of, "Why don't you ever just use a door?" And he responds, "What, like a peasant?"
Yeah.
That is Dr. fucking Doom. Not somebody that I expect to ask from behind that stupid fucking Destro mask of his. So tell me what you don't like about yourself.
How awesome would it have been, though, if he had actually said that? As he's like ready to blow away Jessica Alba as Sue Storm, if he had said, "Tell me what you don't like about yourself," and then shot her face off.
You and I have vastly divergent definitions of awesome, sir. But no, I mean, that's...
What if it was John Candy?
That's a movie where we're casting, I wouldn't say made or broke it, but it certainly took a lot away from it. The story, though, the problem with Fantastic Four is they're very Silver Age. They're going to be very cartoonish, very far-fetched. You can't really ground them in a supposedly real or dramatic world as you would, say, X-Men, which is all the more reason...
And that's why I said you have to... Fantastic Four has to be strictly sci-fi or it doesn't work. That was the problem with the second movie was they went ahead and they did the Silver Surfer, and I don't think anybody who worked on that movie understood, A, the Silver Surfer, or B, what the point of the Fantastic Four was. You got to get them off into space. You got to have them dealing with the Kree and the Skrulls, and they should spend very little time on Earth.
I would also throw in no Galactus ever. No. It is never to be attempted again. Because for one thing, yeah, Galactus, the fucking high-pressure system over Denver, look, damn
Galactus,
retarded.
otherwise known as Los Angeles on a bad day.
Yeah, pretty much. Galactus, the eater of smog warnings. That looked stupid. However, what would have somehow managed to look even dumber would have been if you had actually put him on screen the way he looked in the books, because, let's face it, that is one of the worst costumes ever conceived.
Yeah, well, I mean, I don't know. Comic books are not movies, and while you and I have just spent the last hour wishing they were more like, the movies were more like comic books than anything else, they're just not, and some things are not going to work on screen.
No, but sometimes when it's done right, the results are absolutely spectacular. Look at the first two Spider-Man movies.
Yes, but I think what we're saying is something like Galactus. I would, as much as I want to see Galactus, but I think you're right. Galactus with his funny hat. I just see an audience full of people who've never read the comic before laughing their ass off, and then of course you've got fanboys who absolutely love Fantastic Four and love Galactus, looking at that, covering their face or trying to walk backwards out of the movie theater, disavowing any knowledge of Galactus. Never heard of him. So
have no son.
Yeah, right. I don't know what you're talking about.
Okay, now you want to talk about the Hulk. So
yeah, I want a quick talk about the Hulk. I know there was something that you wanted to discuss before we got out, so we're going to spend the next. I know I wanted to do 90 minutes, but we're going to go a little over that. So I just want to briefly use this opportunity to readdress something that came up again between myself and another individual on Facebook. Let me give a little background here. Now, we're talking about casting, and the Hulk has had lots of people playing him and lots of different versions, and the Hulk, kind of what I said about Punisher. And to this person's credit, this started with I want to say it was Josh Whedon who said that when the Avengers came out, and then there was discussions of, well, is there going to be a solo Hulk movie, which I believe down the line there is. They are planning in, I think, Phase 3, a new Hulk movie, from what I've read. I haven't read much else beyond that. But there was talk of, they don't want to do World War Hulk, they don't want to do Planet Hulk, and the whole concept of doing a Hulk movie, in Josh Whedon's words, was tricky. And I, of course, went into a tirade on Facebook about it, like you do.
You're going back to that conversation.
Well, better now than never. And I said it's not, the Hulk is not tricky. There are already great stories you can do with the Hulk. It's a matter of actually doing them, instead of what they've been doing with the Hulk. And I'm going to now argue the counterpoint to that, because I said it before with the Punisher. I don't think the Punisher works well as a hero in modern movies. I think he works much better as a villain, which is what he was intended when they originally introduced him in Spider-Man. The Hulk is a monster. As I said on Everybody Loves a Villain, the Banner is a tortured human being who turns into a monster who destroys cities. And there's been a few occasions where the Hulk, had enough intelligence and wherewithal to truly be a hero, but at the end of the day, the Hulk and Bruce Banner were always the most interesting when he was trying to keep the monster in a box. That being said, you can still do things with the Hulk on the big screen that does what the Hulk does best, and that is wreck shit. Okay, when the problem I think that people have had with the Hulk is it's almost the same thing that people loved about Batman, and you would wonder why one works and the other one doesn't. But there's all this time spent on Banner's tortured soul and not enough time on the Hulk smashing stuff, except that if you polled the audience and said, why did you want to see this Hulk movie, they would say Hulk smash. So there are ways to do Hulk movies that give you that sort of thing without necessarily making him the hero. And to not do World War Hulk as one of the Avengers movies down the line would be a crying shame. I had submitted for your review an idea that was based off one of the Marvel animated movies, where instead of doing a Hulk movie, do Thor. Do a Thor movie that's based loosely on the Hulk versus Thor animated cartoon, which the plot line of that is Loki using the working with the Enchantress, kidnaps Banner and separates Banner from the Hulk and uses Hulk to destroy Asgard. And the Hulk goes a bridge too far, and it becomes, as they say, another Ragnarok. Meanwhile, back in the city, Banner is in hell. His spirit has been taken by, I want to say her name is Helena. Maybe I'm wrong about that. But essentially, the devil of Asgard claims his soul, and he's basically in the Nexus from Star Trek Generations. His experience of hell is actually heaven in that he's living this illusory life of splendor with Betty. They got a nice house and a fireplace and kids, and this is everything he's ever wanted, except that it's all fake. Meanwhile, the Hulk is destroying Asgard. So Thor and Loki descend into hell to convince Banner to reclaim the Hulk. And Banner absolutely tries to tear his own face off as they're asking him to make the ultimate sacrifice, to become the monster again, to leave heaven and to return to hell. There's such great juxtaposition there and tension and everything that makes a movie great. And meanwhile, you've got this monster absolutely destroying everything in his path. So there's a real pressure on Thor here to try to, to make this happen, because he can't take on the Hulk by himself, not without the calming influence of Banner, even in the recesses of his mind. Why can't you do that movie? Call it Thor. You throw the Hulk in there as the villain, and then you have Mark Ruffalo as playing Banner, having to deal with all of this, who's already proven that he's mastered sort of Banner's tortured psyche. Oh my God, what a great movie that would be! What a setup for things down the line, because later on, you do Planet, how do you not do Planet Hulk as a standalone Hulk movie? How do you've already set up that he's destroyed Asgard once, and then you just do Planet Hulk the way it was written. He goes to work for S.H.I.E.L.D. He ends up getting caught in an explosion that makes him go crazy and see shit for a while, at which point he destroys Vegas. And the Avengers, in this particular case, though, in the comic book, it was the Illuminati, which consisted of several folks from the Avengers and Fantastic Four and such, send him to Mars, okay? They send him off into the universe where he's supposed to land on an uninhabited planet where he can just be the Hulk for the rest of his life and not have to worry about destroying things. And instead, his ship gets knocked off course and he lands on Gladiatorverse. And he takes over Gladiatorverse and becomes king. And just as soon as he becomes king, he loses his queen and, at the time he thinks, his unborn son. At which point he thinks it's the Avengers, once again, who have fucked him for the 9th time. And he returns to Earth to kill everybody. Bam. There's your Avengers movie, folks. I just set it up for you. You've got a Thor movie where Hulk plays the villain, which is what he's better at than being a hero. You've got Planet Hulk, which was a great animated movie, a great comic book series, which would make an awesome movie, and that leads you to yet another Avengers movie, a Phase 3 or Phase 4 Avengers movie if they're done with Ultron and Thanos. What is so hard about this? Where is the tricky in all of that? If people are lining up around the block to see those movies as I laid them out, then I guess I don't understand movies or comic books.
Okay, now here's where you're going to have to refresh my memory, because I'm not going to say I agree with it, because if you recall from this conversation, I actually sided with you. I love your idea. I think it's perfectly feasible, and quite frankly, I think that after the Avengers, what can you really call unfilmable anymore? There's no reason that can't be filmed. There's no reason it couldn't probably be done even cheaper than Disney did John Carter.
What are we talking about here?
Well, I'm talking about your movie, because every time you describe it, that's the kind of look of a movie that I picture. I picture something that reminds me in look a lot of Gladiator meets John Carter from Mars.
Okay. Oh, so we're talking about Planet.
Right. Now, I seem to recall, and again, clarify for me which one it was. I seem to recall that the person with whom you were having this rather contentious discussion said one of two things, I don't remember which. He either said that your idea didn't have enough action and it would bore people.
No, what he was talking about there was, initially I had said if you wanted to redo the Hulk origin story, they should have just done the pilot from the television show, was my initial remark.
Oh, okay.
My initial remark had to do, I had just finished watching the pilot with Bill Bixby from I think the late 70s, and it's awesome. It's really it's the story of the Hulk the way it should be told, in a minimalist style, because it was a made-for-TV pilot for what would be a television series. But it was like a 1 hour. I think that the show itself was only a half an hour, and the pilot was an hour. My times may be off on that, but you get my drift. So it was an extended version of what would be the television show. And in that movie, it's Bruce Banner has the whole setup to the movie is told in sort of this sort of hard to describe the shot, but it's in flashback, and in this flashback you see that he is a man in love. He is content in his universe with a woman at his side, and everything is wonderful. And in one foul swoop, she is robbed from him. Death takes her in a terrible car accident that could not be avoided. And he had a chance to save her, and yet he was too weak to save the woman he loved, his reason to live. And so he spends the next year of his life dedicated to finding out what went wrong that day. And he's tortured by the fact that as he's conducting experiments on how gamma radiation can make someone stronger, that tap into the potential human element of unimaginable strength through gamma radiation, he sees over and over again people weaker than him able to capture it, and he says, "Why? Why is this happening?" And so he makes a choice. Like Vic Mackey and Walter White, he makes a terrible choice, and that is he will experiment on himself. He will irradiate himself with gamma radiation in order to untap the wealth of human potential strength that lies within us all. And the machine has been tampered with, so he irradiates himself like 1,000 times over what the initial intention was. And at first he feels no effect. A little ways down the line, after the worst day at work ever, he's driving home, gets into a car accident, and then there's the very famous scene that you see in the credits where he's got the car jack up and the jack, and he hurts himself with the car jack as it falls down, at which point he turns into the Hulk and starts throwing shit everywhere. Scares a little girl, looks at himself in the water and goes, I've become a monster, and then turns back into Banner. And the rest of the movie is spent trying to figure out what this thing is. And at one point even, his lab assistant, who's kind of the new love of his life, though he doesn't acknowledge it at the time, is able to communicate with the Hulk and sort of figure things out. But it's because of the Jack McGee, who is the reporter who is trying to break this story, interferes with things and causes the whole thing to come undone. And the Hulk accidentally, I think, murders she's not really a lab assistant. That's discrediting her. She's another scientist. So the co-scientist in these experiments who communicates with the Hulk is end up killed by the Hulk accidentally, at which point Banner goes on the run. And then that leads into the Hulk series. And forgetting about the first two movies for a minute, that, by and large, is a much better movie than both of them put together. And so-and-so's argument was that would never work on the big screen. Sean, I just described it to you. What is your opinion?
Scale of 1 to 10. 1 being Cody Rhodes' mustache, and 10 being as much as AJ Gray hates books and not masturbating 50 times a day. What what would be your level of hatred for me if I said that I actually really liked The Incredible Hulk and think it's a very underrated movie?
That's the one with Ed Norton, isn't it?
Yes.
Yeah, it's fine. I don't have a problem with The Incredible Hulk. The problem with people, like some of the folks that write for 411 is they get very caught up in box office numbers. So here you have a movie which by and large is a movie that works, but was not well received. The conclusion drawn is stop doing those movies. I don't know what to say to the stuff. We're not in charge of the studios. I want good films. I'm not so much interested if they make $1 billion. And so if the Hulk was not, if the Incredible Hulk was not tremendously financially successful, that by itself, by and large, is not a complete argument for stop doing Hulk movies, which was the crux of our argument. He was against doing Hulk movies because the last one was financially unsuccessful. I was saying, fuck you, what are you, right? What are you, financially tied to these things? Write them anyway. They're awesome stories. You just need to find one that works.
You got to remember, a good chunk of our 411 readership, more reasonable folk would read our site, read our comment sections, and actually pointedly want to ask to a mortal soul, every last one of these people, what in every blue hell do you care how much money everything makes? Aren't you people just capable of enjoying anything? Everything's buy rates this, buy rates that, ratings, buy rates, sales, box office. The fuck do you care? Just, was it good or not? Yes or no? Did you enjoy it or not? Yes or no? And yes, wrestling section, you are the goddamn absolute worst about that.
Okay, so let me stop you there for just 1 second. The budget on The Incredible Hulk was $150 million.
Okay.
$150 million. The box office, according to Wikipedia, for The Incredible Hulk, and I am assuming that is both domestic and overseas, $263,427,551, which, maybe my math is wrong on this, is greater than $150 million. Now, is that a box office smash? No. But I don't know if that's a reason to not do any more Hulk movies if you've got good stories.
You know what? Similarly mystifying, allow me to kind of draw a parallel to that. This was a story that my good friend and SaveContinue.com editor-in-chief Kyle Gato brought up on Facebook the other day, and for the life of me, I don't understand this. Square Enix, the good people who have brought the world Final Fantasy and Kingdom Hearts and numerous other games, openly just came right out and said that they regarded the Tomb Raider remake, which has been heralded across the board by fans and critics alike as being the savior of that franchise, as a flop for selling 4 million copies. The hell? There comes a point where you've got to be a little bit rational and have a little bit of perspective and think, okay, we can maybe work the financials out some other way so that it's a little more cost effective, so that we get a little bit better return on its investment. You don't want to go and demean the entire quality of something just because it maybe didn't make exactly what you expect.
Here, let me give you an example of a flop. Let me give you an example of a flop that you should not make any more movies. Budget, $225 to $250 million. Box office, present, $230, $398, $692 million. Now, I'm no economist or business owner, but I'm fairly certain that if you go with that if you barely make over your budget, or horror, you don't even make your budget, that's a failure. That's a huge flop. Those movies you don't make anymore. And you want to know what movie I'm talking about?
What movie?
The Lone Fucking Ranger.
Oh, yeah, that one. Yeah, another example, another permutation of this, another kind of kind of extension of this argument. You go and you make a movie. It's a TV to film adaptation of a beloved nostalgic property. Something everybody, almost everybody, remembers fairly fondly from their childhood. It makes money, but you're also widely regarded by most people as being a laughingstock for making it in the first place at best, and at worst, everybody is going, what in the barbecued hell did my childhood ever do to you? So you go and in turn, you decide to, of course, do the most logical thing. Let's make a sequel. And by all regards, it somehow manages to be even worse. I could be talking about any movie with this, but actually with this particular example, I'm talking about the fact that we must all choke down the reality that there are 2 Smurfs movies out there.
Well, unfortunately, when you're talking about the family entertainment genre, the bar is low. Terribly, terribly low. All that has to happen is for parents not to be offended and for children to be amused for the 90 minutes they're going to be, told to sit the fuck down and stop running around the theater. Having said that from personal experience with my child, oh, how I was thrilled that she took a nap during Despicable Me 2.
Well, true, but Lily is also uniquely awesome. Not every kid her age can be taught to chant Cody's mustache.
Real quick, so my ideas for the Hulk, I said, look, they're not going to go back and redo the Hulk's origin. I said at this point, just for God's sakes, move on. Or if you want to do a movie where he's trying to cure himself of at this point after the Avengers, I don't see the point. I think all they can do is play around with the idea of Banner trying to control the Hulk, and there's been so many great stories. I mean, most recently, I think it was 2011, there was a brief 15-issue version of the Incredible Hulk that followed after the one dude who did the World War Hulk series, who introduced us to all the various Hulks that came out of that. And it was one where Dr. Doom actually carved out part of Banner's brain and physically separated Banner from the Hulk. And I told my wife I actually want a picture of one of the frames of this where the Hulk is sort of sitting under a rock and he's got a moose on a spit, by an open fire, and then another panel, and then there's one of him with a shark in the same thing. And I desperately want to hang that on my wall, right next to Batman punching Superman. But I digress. But it was a great little series, and they could totally do that as a movie too, where it doesn't have to be Doctor Doom; it could be Doctor Strange. But whoever they get to do it, they could do a movie where Banner and Hulk become physically separated, and you start to experience Hulk's personality. Because the Hulk wasn't always a rampaging monster, and certainly the way he was portrayed in the Avengers, there was a degree of control. Not in the scene when he's chasing Scarlett Johansson. That was the good old Hulk we know and love. But at the end, there had to have been some degree of control there, or he wouldn't have been able to work with the Avengers in the final sequence. So why not play around with that? Why not do a movie where, after having failed to cure himself of the thing, he's going to try to separate himself, or maybe he's come to grips with the Hulk and he's trying to continue to exert his control over the thing, but he's given this opportunity, for the sake of argument we'll say Doctor Strange to physically separate himself from the Hulk while still allowing the Hulk to exist with a modicum of intelligence, and he takes him up on it. Now the critical element in all of that was Banner went nuts after the Hulk was separated from him. He becomes like the island of Dr. Moreau, where he starts injecting animals with gamma radiation in order to figure out how to recreate himself as the Hulk, because he's come to the conclusion he can't live without the Hulk. That was fucking brilliant, And then they somehow get reattached to one another, but every time the Hulk calms down and reverts back to Banner, when he wakes up, when he becomes the Hulk again, he's in some enormous mess that Banner has gotten himself into. So that was a series within that Incredible Hulk series called Stay Angry. There was like 5 parts to it, and in every one of them, there was Banner was unhatching some nefarious plot, and the Hulk would consistently wake up in some pickle. And it was great. It was a lot of fun to read. But it was a cool turn on the idea of, Hulk's usually the bad guy. What happens if he's the good guy? And Banner's the bad guy. So there's all these ideas that have been floating around in the Hulkverse since the time of Planet Hulk that are just lying there in wait to be made into movies. Fuck off. It's not tricky. It's just go. Dude, the man is signed on for 6 movies. Make one of them, for God's sake. And if there is not a World War Hulk movie, is Avengers World War Hulk? What a waste! What a waste of a perfectly good opportunity.
Generally speaking, I really want to see just at least a temporary moratorium on origin stories.
Yeah.
Because you know
God
what?
bless you.
Because you know what? Tim Burton's Batman wasn't an origin story. It did fine.
Yes.
You know what? The first Blade movie wasn't an origin story. We got his backstory told throughout the movie, but we're getting it a number of years into his career. And it worked just fine. There was absolutely nothing wrong with it. Quite frankly, I would love to see a Doctor Strange movie that maybe doesn't necessarily go as deep into it. In fact, hell, your Doctor Strange debut movie, okay, include the Hulk in that.
Yeah.
You got him right there, and at some point, you got to be realizing, God, can we just stop with the backstory? Are we getting it yet that really nobody honestly cares at this point? That it's all right there, that most of the people who are going to see these movies know where these characters came from? Let's go back and just tell another story. Let's go to the graphic novels, because those are like movie scripts unto themselves. You just rattled off so many Hulk stories that I would watch the hell out of if they would just bring even one of them to live action.
Sean, there's a Hulk story where General Thunderbolt Ross makes a terrible decision to join up with the leader in MODOK and becomes the Red Hulk. And what's really killer about that story is they experimented on his daughter first, and she becomes the Red She-Hulk. The interactions later on between Betty and Banner, and by extension, Red She-Hulk and Hulk, are fucking amazing. Banner professing his love for Betty and her saying, "I can't forgive you for all the years of hurt," turning into the Red She-Hulk, punching him in the face and taking off. There's a whole towards the end of that run of the Hulk, she joined up with one of his arch nemesises and becomes like his lover, and the Hulk is trying to win her back. It was, I think, the subtitle was the spy who smashed me. Just the whole concept of General Thunderbolt Ross making a terrible decision and joining up with the leader in MODOK and becoming the Red Hulk, and sacrificing his name, his career, and at the end of the day, Captain America tells him, "We've already given Thunderbolt Ross a funeral. You'll never be able to turn back into Ross again. You'll have to exist for the rest of your life as the Red Hulk." And what that does to him and how he has to deal with that. And how interesting he was as a Hulk. He punches a Watcher, for Christ's sake. He gets so giddy with the power that he's now been given to take out the Hulk that he punches a Watcher.
To be perfectly honest, all you had to tell me is that there's actually a story called The Spy Who Smashed Me. I want to see that movie.
Yeah, it's great. Even if it's not a strict adaptation, just the concept of Red Hulk, Red She-Hulk, Hulk. Now they have to deal with each other and the relationship they've had in the past. Because let's not forget that Thunderbolt Ross, is Ahab to Hulk's Moby Dick.
Cool.
I mean, it absolutely destroys his career going after the Hulk. Fuck you if you don't think that's a good idea for a movie. It's too tricky. Ugh, eat a dick, Josh Whedon. And on that note, I've expended my wad, as it were. I mean, I could talk about Garfield's Spider-Man. I could talk about where they're going with the X-Men. But I want to spend the last 10, 15 minutes on anything else you wanted to talk about in terms of casting, fantasy booking, etc.
Let me just kind of go on a general editorial rant here, because this has been making the rounds for a couple of months, and it comes up every so often when it comes to playing around with the race of superheroes. And if you're going to get particularly butthurt about this, turn it off now. Now. Go listen to Man Cave Thoughts. Go listen to the Casual Heroes. Go listen to the excellent 411 Games podcast. Go. Because I don't want to hear the bitching.
Is it about John Candy?
No. What am I saying? I'm worried that our audience is going to be overly sensitive about something. When it comes, because this really came up again recently when the thought came up that they might cast Michael B. Jordan of Chronicle to play Johnny Storm in the Fantastic Four reboot. You get this every so often, too, every time somebody comes up and wonders, well, why can't this superhero be this race in this version? Well, why can't it? Why can't that happen? I seem to remember years back somebody was, I hope to God she was joking, Beyonce was talking about how she would want to play Wonder Woman.
I don't think anyone's ready for that, Jelly.
There was once like very, very vague talk of, I hear they might be interested in Will Smith to play Captain America.
Awesome. That's fantastic.
And what you inevitably get is you get several of the same kinds of comments. One is, well, let's be progressive. It's time for a change. It's whatever modern year it happens to be that's removed from the civil rights struggle. Why can't we have a black superhero? Why can't we recast this character as being black? And of course, the counter argument you get to that, and I don't think it's entirely untrue, even if it is a little hackneyed, is, okay, fine. We'll let Eddie Griffin play Spider-Man. One catch. Leonardo DiCaprio gets to play Blade. We get to recast Black Panther as... We get to recast Ryan fucking Gosling as Black Panther. Quite frankly, sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. Michael Clark Duncan as the Kingpin. It worked because Michael Clark Duncan. Because he was able to take an ordinarily white character and he was able to actually really shine in that role and be totally convincing, to be everything the Kingpin is supposed to be except a different pigment. Then there are other times where it doesn't work because whoever's writing the movie figures we need to lampshade the difference as much as possible. We need to call as much attention to this as possible as we possibly can because look how bloody progressive we are. It's not a comic book. I would point out Wild Wild West. We had to work every joke about the Fresh Prince of Bel-Air in the Old West into that movie as we possibly could.
Wait, you actually watched that?
I have seen some shit, man.
I mean, I've seen some terrible movies too, but then there's a giant spider running around the Old West. I can't do it.
Right. So the thing is, the whole point being, it can make sense. It takes the right performer and it takes the right hand. But I also go back to something that Andrew Garfield said recently that made me head desk, and I hope he was kidding. Why can't we have a gay Spider-Man? Because you would very obviously be doing it just for the sake of having a gay Spider-Man.
It's an interesting subject, because here's the thing. If you have a comic book, right? Let's go with Spider-Man. And we're actually talking about the comic. Marvel, Todd McFarlane has left Spider-Man. They need someone to come in and write and illustrate this thing. And they give it to Sean Comer. And Sean Comer says, okay, I'm taking over Spider-Man. I know where Todd McFarlane left off. I'm really showing my age here by talking about Todd McFarlane, but stay with me. And you pitch Marvel like, here's the direction I want to take this in. I want to make Spider-Man gay. They have a choice there. They can either say, that would be interesting as long as you're remaining consistent in the universe that we've already set up because that's important to us. Then go ahead and do it. Or they can say, no, Spider-Man has been straight for, 40, 50-odd years now. No sense turning it on its head. But it wouldn't be the first time Marvel has allowed a writer to take a character in a direction that nobody ever thought they'd go in. This is why the Hulk has been every shade of color and every degree of intelligence and has had weird personality changes over the last 50-odd years. It's because different writers have different takes on a character and experiment with different ideas. There's nothing inherently wrong with the gay Spider-Man. It really comes down to if the gods at Marvel are okay with such a drastic turn, and can it be undone? Can Sean Comer's run on Spider-Man, where he experiments with his homosexuality, be undone when Mark Radulich takes it over and wants to make Spider-Man a psychotic murderer?
Mm-hmm.
We are talking about. This kind of takes us back to the earlier conversation with Superman and Batman. It really becomes It comes down to the eye of the beholder, who the person handling the property, what their vision of this thing is. So to Andrew Garfield's question, can't we have a gay Spider-Man? You can if the people at Marvel are okay with you taking Spider-Man in that direction. I don't think there's anything inherently wrong with that.
No, not necessarily, but the problem is sometimes you get to the point to where, again, you're doing it just for the sake of trying to be, as I like to put it, kind of obnoxiously progressive.
Sure, and I think intent has a role to play in this, but maybe he's being altruistic. Maybe Andrew Garfield is saying maybe there's an element of Spider-Man that hasn't been examined because it lies in his potential homosexuality. Who the fuck knows?
It's that factor of.
Hang on. This is why we have slash fiction, by the way, because there's some people out there that insist Kirk has to have sex with Spock. There's something at work here. We have to figure it out. So we need to go through this whole thing, and that is why Paramount has allowed people to have Kirk fucking Spock on every nerd's computer from here to California and beyond.
And you know what? If there's a way with whatever characters it happens to be that you can make that work, great. More power to you. But there are times where it comes across as, you know what, there's simply no better way to put it. It comes across as you're trying too hard. You're almost, at this point, you're almost sucking up to try to get people into the theater, and you're not really thinking about the characters anymore. The other example I would point, and what you end up with in some of those cases is you end up with the blackface bots from Transformers Revenge of the Fallen.
The minstrel bots. They were my favorite.
Where Michael Bay and company were just trying so damn hard to be hip and edgy and cool with this movie, that instead they end up just being really uncomfortably racist.
You know what I always thought was hilarious about that is black people didn't think that was racist. Black people loved the Transformers movies and thought the Minstrel Bots were fantastic.
Yeah, it's just that
it makes it kind of hard to argue that point. So like, hey, that's racist. That's unfair to black people. And black people go to the theaters by the tens of millions to go see the Minstrel Bots, just shrooking and jiving on the screen, and to see Megan Fox's cleavage.
True.
And it's like, well, okay, if you guys aren't going to fight this argument, why are we fighting it for you? More Minstrel Bots, please.
Fair point, but I return again also to my Will Smith argument. You know, there was actually a way you probably could have toyed with the race of Jim West a little bit there. Again, if you hadn't written him as the Fresh Prince on horseback.
Easy does it one thing at a time. First we get a black sheriff, and we work from there.
It's so, and this came up recently again also because a friend of mine was trying to say that he had some doubts about Jamie Foxx playing Electro in The Amazing Spider-Man 2. And I pointed out, I said, okay, here's the thing. If we get 2 hours of Jamie Foxx's fucking Ray Charles impression, or 2 hours of LaWanda from In Living Color, yeah, it's going to be stupid. It's going to be a huge mistake. However, based on what little footage we've seen so far and what Jamie has displayed already, I give him more credit than that. And also, it works because he's going to be under makeup for a good bit of the movie.
Yeah, I don't have a problem with that. I don't get caught up in the race thing. I'm much more concerned with the stories or lack thereof, as long as it makes sense. I mean, if you wanted to do a black Captain America and say, his origin stems from, I don't know, the Civil Rights Movement and not World War II, whatever. I can't. Life's too short. You want to do Martin Lawrence as the Hulk. If it's Planet Hulk, I don't really care. Fine. As long as he can act his way through it, and it isn't Martin Lawrence doing Martin as the Hulk.
What
do I care?
At this point, we might as well do Jon Stewart as the Jon Stewart Green Lantern.
There you
go. Because God knows we fucked the dog trying to do Hal Jordan the first time, and damn going to see a movie that features Kyle Rayner.
Let me propose this to you. Given the events of Spider-Man 3, would it have not made more sense that Peter Parker was gay?
In that universe, maybe.
That's all I'm saying. I feel like, given the events of Spider-Man 3, Spider-Man 4 should have been him hooking up with Harry. Who he obviously was in love with.
And lo, there was much fanfic.
All righty. I think that wraps up this. This was cathartic. This needed to be done. We needed to take a break from the usual thing and just talk. I told you a couple of weeks back, we need to just sit and talk comic book movies. And I think, so thank you to Warner Brothers for your throw a dart at the board and see which femme actor you hit. Casting of Ben Affleck as Batman that really gave us the impetus to do this podcast. Self-indulgent, sure, but have you heard me and Tay McCarty talk about Dana White? Self-indulgent is my middle name. So, Sean.
And I might add, please, I will mortgage any rights to any future children I might accidentally have, and I do emphasize accidentally. If it can just be true that we are, in fact, getting Bryan Cranston as Lex Luthor.
That seems to have been... Boy, we really are ending where we began. That seems to be true, and that's perfectly fine casting. We just need the broad who plays Skylar as Miss Tessmacher and Aaron Paul as Otis, and I'll be happy.
Oh, fuck Anna Gunn. That's a conversation for a whole different time.
I think we should bring in the entire cast of Breaking Bad. We'll have the broad who plays Marie as Lois Lane, the broad who plays Skylar as Miss Tessmacher. Maybe someone suggested Aaron Paul should be Robin. I'm actually okay with that, bitch. Yo. And then the guy who plays Hank can be Otis. What was that?
If we're casting Anna Gunn, we need to kill Miss Tessmacher off in the first act.
Well, whatever. But we totally need to. The entire cast of Breaking Bad needs to be supporting characters in this. Aaron Paul as Robin, as the Jason Todd Robin, so that later on we can blow him up in a warehouse after beating him to death with a crowbar.
Shit, it actually made me want to see Jason Todd.
Jason Todd was good for one thing, and that was the Death in the Family series.
If he, you know what? If he is being, well, I'd also throw the Under the Red Hood DC animated movie in there too. But my God, if Aaron Paul is playing Jason Todd, I am in.
So there we go. That's the Radulich casting of Man of Steel 2. You got Ben Affleck as Batman, Henry Cavill reprising his role as Superman, Bryan Cranston as Lex Luthor, the guy who plays Hank in Breaking Bad as Otis. We have to have Otis back, and then we have to have the John Williams score. Do 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 do. Anna Gunn as Miss Tessmacher, the chick who plays Marie as Lois Lane. Get rid of the other broad with the red hair, or keep her, and we'll have the broad who plays Marie be Vicky Vale or something. I don't know. Catwoman. There we go. Let's put Catwoman in there, and she can be Catwoman.
Nice.
All right. Warner Brothers, I await your phone call. All right. Anything you want to plug this week?
Tune in this Sunday night / Monday morning for the conclusion of the Kanye West series of Give Life Back to Music, because I am going to be talking about the disappointment that was My Beautiful Dark Twisted Fantasy and Jesus in one shot, and also announcing who I will be doing for my second series. Coming up later, not I guess this month, but early next month, it finally happened. I'm finally in a position to where Samara and I can get The Lost Weekend off the ground over at SaveContinue.com. Stay tuned here for more on when that's going to be premiering. You have no idea how long it took me to finally get enough bills caught up that I could get my PS3 out of hock. And yes, and by all means, stay tuned here in 2 weeks from when we kick off our next two-part franchise look. And in October, remember, Mark is going on vacation, and Robert Winfrey and I are going to be taking a nice long look at one of the franchises that inspired me to co-create this podcast, and that is Hellraiser. And by the way, that is also going to be the start. Well, I guess we could say that Rambo is kind of going to be the end of the Blog Talk Radio era of Long Road to Ruin, and it is going to be the start of the Google Hangouts / YouTube era.
That certainly seems to be, we have to make sure that your Wi-Fi is working correctly so we don't have the problems that we had on the...
Yeah. Folks, for those of you, and you know who you are, who really like to hear my creative permutations of the word fuck, it's a damn shame that you could not have joined Mark and I on the little test Google Hangout that we did the other night, because due to my owing Cox Cable currently the amount of $250 in back bills, I don't have my high-speed internet. I'm using a free voucher-based Wi-Fi service called Freenet AZ. Sometimes it's pretty good. For the last 3 days, I have had a consistent, nonstop 5-bar signal. Other days, it's like it's 1998 and I'm using AOL again. the night Mark and I tried to do this podcast in which we tried to talk about some of the very worst fast food product marketing decisions of all time, it wasn't so much AOL as Netscape. It was CompuServe. We were getting outages about every couple of minutes, and it was impossible for us to get a bead on whether or not we were doing anything right, recording anything effectively. But once we get that hammered out, yes, as Mark announced at the top of the show, we are going to be going to a format where we are going to be on a live Google Hangout every night. And we're going to record the show, and then what's going to happen is Mark's lovely and talented wife, Melissa, is going to edit it together into a video format, which we are then going to be sharing both via link on 411 Mania, but more importantly, it's going to be hosted on the Manic Expression YouTube channel, which is a great opportunity for us to earn a little pittance of ad revenue. And also, we're going to have to figure out some way to also make the podcast itself available for download, how to transfer it to MP3 or something like that, which I think I've already got figured out. We can talk about that later. But in addition, the one other thing I would want to mention is at that point when we start watching the show, if you happen, once we're on YouTube, please do not enable ad blocker when watching the show. Well, I realize that's a temptation. I realize the ads get repetitive and everything, but please turn it off. This is a chance for us to actually earn a small amount of money, and by small, I mean probably fairly small, just doing something that Mark and I happen to enjoy anyway, and that's just sitting here like we just got out of a movie and we're just chatting over some diner fries and a burger about what we just saw. Just pretty much fanboying out at this stuff. So, anyway, that rant really got away from me.
All right. So, a week from tonight, a Metal Hammer of Doom podcast with myself, Sean Garmer, and, of course, Robert Cooper of the Three Beards fame. We will be reviewing Phil Ensemble and the Illegals, which, from what I understand, sounds a lot like Superjoint Ritual, but we shall see what we shall see. So we'll be reviewing that. If you go back into the archives, you can listen to previous Long Road to Ruins. We just wrapped up Mission Impossible. Before that, we looked at Jurassic Park. It's been we've had
clear back Rocky retrospective we never finished.
Yes, we have a Rocky retrospective we never finished. We need to get that done.
That needs to be like our 1 year change anniversary show.
There you go, a year later. Now, of course, as Sean said, in 2 weeks we'll be doing the first of our 2-part Rambo series. Eventually, we'll have Lambert on here to do Transformers when he has time for us with all his 76 other podcasts that he does. We're all very busy bees. Every Sunday night at 9 o'clock is the 401 Ground & Pound radio show, and you can find every single one of these podcasts on the Radulich and Broadcasting Network on iTunes or Stitcher Radio. Go ahead, and either one of those platforms, go ahead and rate us 5 stars, leave comments, tell us what you like, tell us what you don't like. If you enjoy my pitches for movies, go tell somebody at the studio so that I can become a consultant for the comic book motion pictures. That's what I'd like to do. I don't actually want to work in Hollywood, but occasionally if someone pays me lots of money, I can tell them what movie they should make next. That's all I want to do in life.
Tell them that you want to see a movie simply titled More Dinosaurs.
and for Sean, I want to see them do The Incredible Hulk, The Spy Who Smashed Me. Fantastic. Okay. This week I'm also in Music Factor Fiction, and check out my appearances on the Casual Heroes podcast, where you can hear me talk more about Ben Affleck. And any day now there'll be another WrestleCast where we talked about last week's Raw, where I felt like they turned Bryan Danielson into Steve Austin's vagina. Ugh, just God. Steve Austin with his broken neck and Stone Cold stunned the entire locker room, but Jesus Christ, they couldn't give Daniel Bryan the least little bit of offense, in a 3-hour show. It drove me crazy. But that's a conversation for another time. So, on behalf of Sean, this has been The Long Road to Ruin. We'll get back to business in 2 weeks. Be well, be safe, and behave. Psych?
Batman got on my nerves. He was running me amok. He ridiculed me, calling me a bum. I whooped Batman's ass. 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 Batman thought he was bad. He was a fucking asshole in the first place. He got knocked to the floor. I whooped Batman's ass. I whooped Batman's ass. I whooped Batman's ass. I whooped.
At Casper, we love sleep as much as you do. That's why we're bringing back the very first bed-in-a-box millions love at a price everyone will love. Meet the Casper, a mattress so comfortable it could only have one name. Enjoy 4 layers of cozy support for just $9.95. Plus, get AirScape technology to help you wake up refreshed. Get your best rest at our best price with the new Casper mattress. Shop online or visit a Casper sleep shop near you today. Casper, for the love of sleep. Exclusions apply. See casper.com/promo.
You know when you're really stressed or not feeling so great about your life or about yourself? Talking to someone who understands can really help. But how do you find that person? Talkspace. Talkspace makes it easy to get the support you need. With Talkspace, you can go online, answer a few questions, and be matched with a therapist. And because you'll meet online, you don't have to take time off work or arrange childcare. You'll meet on your schedule, wherever you feel most at ease. If you're depressed, stressed, struggling with a relationship, or if you want some counseling for you and your partner, or just need a little extra support, Talkspace is here for you. And because Talkspace is recruiting top therapists daily, you can rest assured you'll find your perfect match. Plus, Talkspace works with most major insurers, and most insured members only pay a $25 copay or less. No insurance, no problem. Now get $80 off your first month when you go to Talkspace.com. Match with a licensed therapist today at Talkspace.com. Talkspace.com.